All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Let me open in prayer, and then we can get into Joshua, the final parts of Joshua. Father Yehovah, we give you great thanks, Father. We thank you for another wonderful Shabbat, and you just bringing us together again, Father. We thank you for all that you do for us and your provision. And personally, I thank you that you were able to get my wife home sound and safe, Father. I thank you for that. And Father, as we look into your words, we look to be encouraged. We look to have your Spirit fill us and give us the wisdom and empower us so that we may walk your ways out before you and before all mankind. We thank you for the redemption that you had placed in your only Son, Yahushua. Amen. Well, good to have all you guys here. We might have to bring in some more chairs. It's so crowded here, so... So what I'd like to do today, and hopefully we should be able to accomplish this task, is going through Joshua chapter 20 through 24. Because next week we're going to start the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. So for the in-depth. And I look forward to doing that. But we should be able to get through all this. So let's go on. So in Joshua 20, what we have. And a lot of this I'll be reading, and I'll get your input as well as we go through this. Joshua 20, because we know they just now, just a rehash, they just now divided up the land by lot. That's been the major thing that we've seen the last couple of times we've got together on this. So the land has, for the most part, at this part, has been divided out, and everyone's trying to get home and comfy. Yes? Oh, yes, it's right here. Do you have something to turn it on?
No, I just wanted to have it. Oh, yeah.
You got, okay, awesome. So, Joshua 20, it begins this way. And Yahweh spoke to Yahushua, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, appoint for yourselves cities of refuge, of which I spoke to you through Moshe. For the slayer who kills and being accidentally, unintentionally to flee there. And they shall be for refuge for the revenger of blood, and he shall flee to one of those cities, and stand at the entrance of the gate of the city, and declare his case in the hearing of the elders of the city. And they shall take him to the city as one of them, and give him a place, and he shall dwell among them." Then it goes on and it lists the various cities that they had separated out for this very purpose. And then in 9, "These are the cities appointed for all the children of Israel, and for the stranger who sojourns in their midst, for anyone accidentally killing any being or person to flee there, and not die by the hand of the revenger of blood until he stood before the congregation." So here we see specific cities are being set aside for a city of refuge. And then John, this is where I was going to talk to you about. So it seems like here, John, it says, giving him place, it talks about the elders of the city, and shall take him into the city and give him a place, and they shall dwell. And then later on, like in verse 4, "And he shall flee to one of these cities, stand in the entrance of the gate of the city, declare his case in the hearing of the elders of that city." So would that be like due process that's going on here for a man accidentally killing someone to protect him for a trial or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, he's following the procedures necessary to make his case. If he actually committed the crime and he is a murderer, though, then he could be judged. It isn't, there's a judicial proceeding that needs to follow. If he's a murderer, he's a murderer, and he will be judged accordingly. But if it was a manslaughter case like he's claiming it is, then he will be protected in the city.
Because so in some ways, this is no different how we run our thing. We have someone who's been accused of any various crimes, and they're either taken to jail temporarily or a trial date is set. So it's the same principles working here that we're familiar with as well, right? So we have that. That's pretty much what Joshua 20, chapter 20 is all about, these cities setting up. And again, this is something that had been spoken that Moses got from Yahuwah from way before, to do this type of governing here in that
Right.
sense.
So he's not just making this up, he's following what the instructions are to do as far as making cities of provisions for this in the Torah.
Yes.
Right.
And which I think is so interesting if you really begin, let me speak from myself, where I found so much as I started really, let's say, reading the Old Testament and really looking into it, that it's like, man, our Father, he's concerned of what we put in our mouth, what we put before our eyes, how we behave, and how our finances operate, not just as individuals, but in how we're governed, and not as individuals, but as a group as well. And I think to me, that's very fascinating. So you have, if we talk secular, we have a God that actually cares and going to show you what is good for you and your finances, what's good for you and your family, what's good for you personally. And it's like, to me, that's just amazing. You don't hear Zeus and all these other, gods that are any kind of concern of that. So I think that flies right in the face of so many other deities, and I'm not aware of any other deity that has such a interesting code of conduct of grace to his children. Yes, Jerry.
I was struck by the comment where it said the guy needs to present his case before the elders of the city, and they will adjudicate it, if you will. They'll determine whether it's, I guess, the situation that comes to my mind is he's been involved in the death of another person. And
Yes.
the question is, did that other person die at his hand through malice aforethought, or was it truly an accident?
Yes.
If it's through malice aforethought, then he is guilty of murder, and they'll have to execute him. But if it was, given witnesses and various different things, if it looked like an accident, then that's what this whole thing is all about.
Yes.
But the thing I'm getting at is the responsibility of the elders of the city, because they're the ones that are responsible for making this decision. And they're the ones, you were talking about the difference between the group and the individual, because they represent the whole city. And they're responsible for being ethical, honest, trustworthy, clear-sighted, whatever words you want to use. And if they're not, if they as individuals are corrupted or corruptible or, show favoritism or many other things that we can think of that are not what God would honor, then the whole group suffers because they are that way. So I guess I was just wanting to, I've thought a lot about it, and I think it's good to think about the part that we play in the whole. I really appreciate the fact that God's looking out after me with respect to the things I do, and like you say, finances and all the rest of this stuff. But we have a responsibility to certainly our immediate community as well. And I just think it's kind of interesting to think about that. That's
No,
all.
I know, and I think that's beautiful too, because he's in some ways saying you can self-govern, you can grow up, guy, and self-govern yourself by the things I've given you, But at the end of the day, just because you have a judge doesn't mean he's judging righteously. You know what I mean? A just judge, it still depends on what he's doing and the community as whole. And I mean, I can see that here in America as well. We can't really complain too much because we've put these people and allowed them to do what they want with wrong judgments on certain things. Yes, Sister Pat.
I'm fascinated of late a lot with the power of our words. And here, it's a necessity for the person being accused to give his own testimony, his own verbal declaration.
No lawyers involved here, right?
But the
Not that
fact-
they're a bad thing per se, but
No,
I
I think that he has brought up the it is valid to have the others, but it couldn't be a whole system without the personal verbalization. And we don't receive our salvation except by the confession of our mouths.
No, that's interesting connection. Awesome. Thank you, sister. And the other thing I wanted to point out here, this happens in the gates, in the gate of the city. And so many times we've seen, for instance, Lot. Remember this with Lot? He was at the city gates when coming in. So the gates of the city seem to be a place where judgments were brought forth and passed in so many different areas. Even in, what you let into the city, you judge if you want that in your city or not. And we can look at that on a larger scale, as well, too. I think, sister, did you have your hand up as well, too? Verse 6? I don't have that. I didn't have that. Do you want to, can you give her the mic and she can read it?
Okay.
Or you have a question real quick, and then we'll go right back to her.
Okay. One thing I was going to say, it says the congregation rules rather than one judge, so that's like a jury. And then it's a marked difference between honor killings like you often see in that part of the country now.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have verse 6. I only have to 4, and then I skipped to the end to 9. What's that? Well, I did it purposely.
Okay, 20 verse 6. And he shall dwell in that city until he stand before the congregation for judgment, and until the death of the high priest. That shall be in those days. Then shall the slayer return and come into his own city. My question is, I don't understand why it has to include the death of the priest for him to return. And what happens if he's judged and, 48 hours later the high priest dies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? I really don't have an answer for you on that, sister. I didn't look into that part of it. But John, if you have any...
Who's our high priest?
Oh, that's interesting, because when he returns, that's when the judgment really comes on down, doesn't it?
Right, so the person that's going there is sacrificing his life in a sense because he's no longer, he can't go about, his liberty has been limited. He has to live inside the city limits and until he's been redeemed, until the high priest essentially pays the punishment for this person, this manslaughterer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So he's, and our priest obviously is Yeshua, and therefore we are justified now to go outside the city at that point. Does that make sense?
To me, it makes sense prophetically on a big scale, but what on a smaller scale of just this happening,
It's a shadow picture. Right. Is that what you're getting at? Right. The high priest is redeeming this manslaughterer. And we're all guilty of sin, so we can't do it on our own. We need someone superior to redeem us. The high priest is taking his sin to the grave. Right. Something like, he takes on the punishment.
Wow.
And my thoughts on it is that's very ethereal, very Hellenistic to be spiritualizing Yeshua as our high priest in the heavens versus a constitution, the covenant that he gave us here on earth. So I think, a manslaughter charge being covered here on earth by his blood is one thing, but for him to leave the city of sanctuary and roam about would open him to to being killed by the kinsman redeemer. So, just my thoughts.
All right, let's go on to Joshua 21. And the heads of the fathers of the Levites come near to Eleazar the priest, to Yeshua, son of Nun, and to the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel. And they spoke with him in Shiloh in the land of Canaan, saying, Yahweh commanded through Moshe to give us cities to dwell in, with their open land for our livestock. So the children of Israel gave to the Levites from their inheritance at the command of Yahweh these cities and their open land. And then it goes on and it talks about the various cities and the open land. Because we know with the Levites, they really didn't have any inheritance. They didn't have any inheritance like all the other tribes. But yet, in some sense, they were given some land in here for their outside of it. It seems like the way I would understand it, outside of some of these cities for their livestock and stuff, because you're still going to need, if you need a place to put your livestock. But they didn't literally get any land allotted to the tribe of Levite themselves. Levites seemed to be, in the inheritance among all the other tribes with their inheritance, which is kind of interesting too. You see how the Levites were spread amongst them, So as they'd be working, I would see it as they're working in the temple in their shifts or at the tabernacle within their shifts, they would go back to where they're living or whatever. So you saw the spread, in some sense, you saw the spread of the Father's Torah in that sense being spread out on a continual basis in amongst all the children of Israel on a continual basis as that goes. So, and if there's any other insight or comments you guys have on that, Jerry?
I usually try not to be so wordy, but all these cities were, they're small towns,
Correct.
but they're where the Levites live, right? They're assigned, or this happens to be where they live, and there's I think it's in Numbers where it talks about it's the small town itself plus so much land around it, not much, but a ring around it a certain number of feet or cubits.
That was given,
and
yeah.
that's for them to grow their crops and all. And it's my understanding that these Levites then are the ones who are responsible for taking care of the people from a spiritual point of view in that community. So they're like your local guys.
Yeah.
And it's also my thought that given that the worship, the place God will put his name is in Jerusalem. So that's where they had to go for the holidays. That's where they had to go 3 times a year. That's where they had to go present their tithe and all that kind of stuff was there. But around these little towns, which were in the far-flung, all over, there's a lot of them, right? All over Israel. That was their local congregation. And what their local congregation did more than anything else was teach. That's probably where they went to learn the Torah. Because they probably had, weekly Shabbat things, kind of like we do.
Yeah.
Where that's where the people learn Torah.
I know I'd be there with
kinda cool.
questions.
Yeah.
So no, and I think it's interesting how the Father set the dynamics up the nation itself in that sense, separating the tribes, but yet in the same time, how all that inner works and it evolves around, obviously, where he eventually, like you said, brother, where he sets his name, but how that all works together, as a unit in a sense too, So here in Joshua 21 is where the cities are allotted to the high priest. Then at the end of Joshua 21, all the cities of the Levites within the possession of the children of Israel were 48 cities with their open lands. Each of these cities had its open land and open land surrounding it. So it was with all these cities. And Yahweh gave to Israel all the land of which he had sworn to give to their fathers, and they took possession of it and dwelt in it. And Yahweh gave them rest all around according to all that he had sworn to their fathers. And not a man of all their enemies stood against them. Yahweh gave all their enemies into their hand. Not a word failed of any good word which Yahweh had spoken to the house of Israel, all came in, which I think it's kind of interesting that that's put in there about the cities. But here too, we see so much, everything that the Father had spoke about is coming to pass. They're in the land and how that's operating. And they all came in, so they all came into this themselves. You know, it all came to pass, everything. That's actually the word that's all came in is that word bo in Hebrew, is to come. So it all had come in, just like the Father said. And it was based on their obedience too, that a lot of these things had come in, has come to pass as well. In Joshua 22, when Yahushua called for the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh and said to them, you have guarded all that Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, commanded you, and have obeyed my voice in all that I commanded you. You have not left your brothers these many days up to this day, but you have guarded the charge, the commandment of Yahweh your Elohim. And now Yahweh your Elohim has given rest to your brothers as he promised them. And this promising is his words are coming true, what he said over and over again. So now return and go to your tents and to the land of your possession, which Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, gave you beyond the Jordan. Only diligently guard to do the commandment that the Torah which Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, commanded you, to love Yahweh your own Elohim, and to walk in all his ways and guard his commands, and to cling to him and to serve him with all your heart and with all your being. And Joshua blessed them and sent them on their way, and they went to their own tents. So this is talking about the Reubenites and the Gadites. Remember, they had their inheritance already before they crossed the Jordan, but yet they came over to make sure the rest of their brothers got their inheritance. So it's coming to a close to this part where Joshua is saying, okay, you fulfilled, you did everything that you said that you would do, you had your possession, it's time to go home. There's not much more. It seems like at this point a lot of the enemies, there's still some that must be taken out, but it's coming to a point where they have done their part. And Joshua is excusing them from their oath and from their word as saying that they would help their brothers take over the land here. Am I missing anything in there, Jerry, on that? So, which is a very important that you see that Joshua is commending them because they did uphold their word that they said. And then in Joshua 22 later on, and it came to be in the districts of the Jordan, which is in the land of Canaan, and the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh built an altar there by the Jordan, a great conspicuous altar. And the children of Israel heard it and said, and it goes on, and then the children of Israel heard all the congregation of the children of Israel assembled in Shiloh to go to fight against them. So the children of Israel sent Pinchas, son of Eleazar, the priest, to the children of Reuben, and to the children of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, to the land of Gilead, and the 10 rulers with them, 1 ruler each from the chief house of every tribe of Israel, and each one was the head of the household of his fathers among the divisions of Israel. So we have Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh. They build an altar. And it's interesting, I looked up this word, a great and conspicuous altar. So I looked at that Hebrew word behind there, and the word that I found that was behind that conspicuous or great sight, that they built, it actually goes way back to, the best way I can explain it, depends on it in its context as well too, but it seemed to mean a good visage or a good visual. Like, for instance, Abraham's wife, he was, hey, you have the same word here in Hebrew. You have a good visual here of who you are. You look nice, or how, you're attractive. We're going down to Egypt, and they're going to want you and kill me. And Rachel was the same one who this word was applied to her as well. Yes?
I just looked it up myself. Is the word gadol?
Gadol
that-
is the great part.
Okay,
It's
so
the
there's
other
another word there that I need to look up?
mare, or mareha. It's mem.
I'll look it up again.
Yes, it's the one next to it. Gadol, though, I'm glad you brought that up. It is great. Gadol is, and it's the same word, Gadol being great or mighty. The first time I think it's used is when the sun and the moon, that he created great lights in the sky. And he's referring to the sun and the moon as Gadol, very great. So it seemed to be very big and something that you're not going to miss visually.
So in the King James, it says to see.
To see.
Mare is the
Mare, that's
Hebrew
it.
word, right?
So it was something that, and it was put there, and it seems like in the text, or at least what I'm gathering, it's like, okay, you couldn't miss this, and it was a great sight to see, So, but the word got back that they built this altar, so the rest of the tribes, they're kind of on edge. Our brothers, okay, they went back across the Jordan, and now they're, and it seems like they're assuming that they're building their own altar to Yahuwah other than the tabernacle which has been established. Polly, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just
Or a
have.
comment?
So what is your thought on the difference between this altar that was built and other altars that we see that were built and there was not any great alarm? Noah built an altar. We see other places that altars were built and there was not.
All I could see right now, this is after the fact when they got to Mount Sinai, where more things were being established, especially around the tabernacle as being, okay, this is where, the sacrifices and things were to come. He seemed to be generalizing everything on that. Not that there wasn't other altars, but it seemed like this was more, at least I was thinking more, this was more competing for the tabernacle, more so than just an altar somewhere, and that's the best of my knowledge that I know so far. Yes, John?
So this is what the northern tribes do in a bad way. They build their own altar up in the city of Dan, I think, was one of them, and Shiloh was the other one, is that right?
Yeah, eventually that's
Bethel,
what
okay.
when they started they started doing that.
After
Yeah.
they were divided.
So, but this story, let me read on, and we'll see there's a little bit different thing that's happening here, that the rest of the tribes coming over and seeing what they were doing. Then the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and half tribe of Manasseh answered and said to the heads of the divisions of Israel, El Elohim Yahuwah, El Elohim Yahuwah. He knows, and let Israel itself know if this has been a rebellion, or if in trespass against Yahuwah. Do not save us this day. If we have built ourselves an altar to turn from following Yahuwah, or if offer burnt offerings or grain offerings on it, or if to make peace offerings on it, let Yahuwah himself require it, but only from fear. For a reason we did this, saying, in time to come, your sons might speak to our sons, saying, what have you to do with Yahuwah Elohim of Israel? For Yahuwah has made the Jordan a border between you and us. Your children of Reuben and the children of Gad, you have no portion with Yahuwah, so your sons would make our sons stop fearing Yahuwah. So we said, let us now prepare to build ourselves an altar, not for burnt offerings nor for slaughterings. So Reuben and Gad and Manasseh, they are saying, okay, there's this Jordan, seems to be, at least at this time, I would say, it's some kind of a big border, so I don't see them crossing the Jordan constantly here. So it seems like there's the division for them, you know. And they're concerned that because of this river that's dividing the promised land up, that eventually one side where you have more is going to say, hey, you really aren't part of us, or there's going to be some kind of separation that might happen there. Do you have some more on that, Jerry, as well?
Well, I have something to talk about in a minute.
Okay.
But all I would say with what you were saying there is, for us, we don't think anything about rivers. Because, there's always a
We got
bridge there.
bridges, yeah.
But back then there wasn't. And so the river was a natural boundary, and it definitely would have been a natural boundary to divide. Furthermore, whenever God was telling the Israelites where they were going, he kept telling them, you're going to cross the Jordan. It's on the other side of the Jordan. And when Gad and Reuben and half the tribe of Manasseh said, we kind of like this land here on the east. Can we just have this?
Mm-hmm.
That was not what God had said originally. So there's reason for them to think that, our brothers might someday turn their back on us because we're not doing exactly what Moses asked us to do.
So they were concerned that they still wanted to be part of the whole and didn't want to be considered separated out of Israel itself. So in 27, but be a witness between you and us and our generations after us to do the service of Yahweh before him with our burnt offerings, with our slaughterings, and with our peace offerings, that your sons should not say to our sons in the time to come, you have no portion with Yahweh. So we said that it should be, when they say this to us, or to our generations in time to come, that we shall say, see the pattern of the altar of Yahweh, which our fathers made, though not for burnt offerings, not for slaughterings, but it is a witness between you and us. Far be it for us to rebel against Yahweh and to turn from following Yahweh this day, to build an altar for burnt offerings, for grain offerings, or for slaughterings, besides the altar of Yahweh, our Elohim, which is before his dwelling place. So, it's just, they wanted to build something as a witness. Listen, say if it was me, and we're down, my forefathers were part of this, guys, and look, here's the witness saying, yeah, we were all part of this, we are part of you. Just because we're on this side of the river, this is a witness. This is just a testimony in a sense that, yes, we know the same pattern, and we are part of you, regardless. Yes, John?
So, has it been established where his name is to build the altar? Not yet, Jerry says. Okay. It seems to me you're not in a good position when you have to explain it. There's a lot of verses here explaining what their intent is.
Mm-hmm.
That's a telltale sign that you're trying to defend something that you really shouldn't be doing. I don't know what your opinion on this, but it seems to me they shouldn't be doing. Manasseh, half the tribe of Manasseh, and the Reubenites and the Gadites shouldn't be doing this. I don't know what.
You know what? I don't know, because the wording I see, and then later on it seems to be well with all the rest of the guys.
Yeah.
The rest of the tribes aren't too shaken up. But I don't know. For me, I think it would be safe to assume that the tabernacle for all those years, seems to be the focal point. And later on, he's going to place his name somewhere else, and the tabernacle ends up there anyhow, and it's just in a form of the temple. So, I would still be assuming that it's understood where the tabernacle is. That's the key hub there.
This all is based on this concept of where God will put his name. But
Yes.
if you remember, I think it was either in Numbers or Leviticus where God said, you are not to sacrifice any animals except in the place that I put my name.
Yes.
So don't be sacrificing out in your fields and stuff like that. And he was insistent about that. And I think The reason that the rest of the Israelites were upset with this is because that's exactly what this looked like. It looked like,
Yes.
though, they're going to build an altar out there so they can have their own sacrifices. And that's why they were alarmed and upset. And I think what the Gadites, the Reubenites, and half the tribe of Manasseh said was, no, we're not going to sacrifice on it. That's what they said.
Yeah.
This is not for sacrifice. And you know, to me, this is like that pillar that Laban and Jacob set up. They said, this pillar here is a witness.
Yes.
And the witness is to say in future generations, we worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And as witness to that, this is a replica, is the word they used,
Yeah,
of
that
the
seems
altar.
to be, there's a little bit more to just, there's
So,
a
but the-
similarity
I
looking
think
something
the
here.
key there was whenever they said, we are not going to offer sacrifices on it.
Mm-hmm.
Once they said, we're not going to offer sacrifices on it, the other side backed way down.
Mm-hmm.
They thought, well, okay, you know, it's if you're not doing that seems to be the big deal. The
Then
sacrifice.
It's a fine looking altar then.
The sacrifice, that's the key point of worship,
Yes.
is the sacrifice. And if they're not sacrificing, then they're not worshiping. And I think, this is my opinion, I think the reason God was so concerned about that is because the Israelites and all these people back at those days were so prone to go to different
Everywhere,
idol
yeah.
worship. And if you have, you know, everybody can worship everywhere. If, you know, you got altars all over the country that you can worship, then it's going to go astray. There's just no two ways about it. And so this was what God didn't want to have happen. And I think what's told in the story is the fact that the Gadites, Reubenites, and Manassites were basically saying, no, we're not trying to set up another altar to perform sacrifices. We just want to make sure that you guys don't one day cut us out.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
yeah, and as a memorial, remember, because of the division that the river placed geographically for them as well, you know. Yes, John, and then I think we had Sister back there.
I think part of this problem is, and I think we've already talked about it, we know where he will place his name in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And because they didn't fully do what they were supposed to do, which is to take out the Canaanites, they never got a hold of Jerusalem, or what will become Jerusalem. So maybe, I'm projecting here, but maybe if they would have done that part, that then they could have established where his name should have been, where we know it will be eventually. So I think these guys are compromising. They're settling for the position that they put themselves in. Does that make sense?
But the other thing though, because I know way back when they first built this, build it like so, the pattern that was given to Moses, because I want to dwell among you. Is that another way of saying I'm going to be right there? My name is there because it's a dwelling place, so I may dwell amongst you. And I still see to me in some ways, the tabernacle is wherever he's at. It just later on he places instead of a roaming thing, it becomes Jerusalem, you know. And this was just the altar itself here, you know. And sometimes I wonder, because, you know, this menorah here I had made, you know, and I had people, oh my gosh, you shouldn't. And I'm like, well, the purpose that I had made that wasn't to duplicate the tabernacle or the temple service or anything like that. But it's, you know, because we wouldn't have any kind of menorahs if, so I see that plays a part too in there as well. Yes, sister.
I can't remember where it's at, but it was either a prophet or a king actually ends up taking this altar down because they did end up worshiping it a number of generations later.
Oh, this
Yeah.
altar?
I
you know what?
remember reading that story and trying to find this one.
Mm.
But, and then also in Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah, it talks about God having a witness in Egypt, which is mysterious. I'm not really sure what that means, but there seems to be something supposedly in Egypt that's testimony to him somehow that.
Yeah, and I'm not, Mark may know more about the Egypt testimony, but as far as if this was eventually used, that I don't know. But I wouldn't throw it too far away from us, because we know the bronze serpent that was used, later on that pops up and they start worshiping that thing. You know what I mean? So, you know, that very well could be the case. Me and Mark were talking earlier today, if we view ourselves as Ephraim and who we are, we do have an issue with worshiping strange stuff and setting up stuff. We got to be honest. You could just look at our holidays and stuff like that, and if you really back away and look at it, it's like, wow, it should be clear who Ephraim is because of their issues they have with idols. But that's another story in itself. All right, Dave, sorry.
They almost, if you go back to verse 11, it says they're setting it up on the border of the land of Canaan in the region of Jordan, on the side that belongs to the children of Israel. So it could be a distinction telling the heathens on the other side of that border. I mean, it's on their own land, but it's right near the border of the Canaanites. So it's a great altar, so you can see it. Maybe that's part of it, that it's a warning to the heathen nations around him.
That's interesting. But it seems to must be, I would imagine, at least what I've gathered, it must have been something that was easily recognized or seen. So it must not have been too small. That's what I'm guessing. Especially with Gadol before, mighty, but I don't know. So, chapter 23 and 24 are the final chapters of the book of Joshua. Each of these chapters include a farewell speech by Joshua, and chapter 24 includes an account of Joshua's death. There is a similarity between that of Moses and Joshua in their final days. That's what if you see that, you'll have to go back and read it, but you see when Moses was getting ready to pass, certain things were done, and it seems like Joshua is following in somewhat that same type of pattern as well. So Joshua 23, and it came to be a long time after Yahweh has given rest to Israel from all their enemies round about, that Joshua was old, advanced in years, and Joshua called to all of Israel, and for their elders and for their heads and for their judges and their officers, and said to them, I am old and advanced in years, and you have seen all that Yahweh your Elohim has done for all these nations, done to all these nations because of you. For Yahweh your Elohim is he who is fighting for you. See, I have divided to you by lot these nations that remain, to be an inheritance for your tribes. So he starts to go on here. He's gathering them together, and he's going back and saying, look at the evidence. Look right before you. He's going, this was what the Father promised, and this is what he has upheld. So he kind of starts going into a little bit of historical history of how they got there, which I think is kind of important, because even us in America, the less that we talk about the things that have happened in America, the less that we're going to remember them, Or they can be changed, and that's world history as well, as too. And in 6, and you shall be very strong to guard and to do all that is written in the book of the Torah of Moshe, so as not to turn aside from the right or left, so to make no mention of the name of their mighty, so as not to go in among these nations, these who remain among you. So there is still some we see that they needed to get rid of. And make no mention of the name of their mighty ones, or their deities, or their gods, or who they worship, nor swear by them, nor serve them, or bow down to them. And that's right that's Mount Sinai, I think at Exodus 20, where he's giving the 10 Commandments. For Yahweh has driven out before you great and strong nations. As for you, no one has stood against you to this day. And it's very evident where they're at. They were able to conquer very quickly. And I think I estimated at one point it was like a 5-year campaign maybe that they were able to go through and accomplish this. No man of you, one man of you put 1,000 to flight, For Yahweh your Elohim is he who is fighting for you, as he has promised you. And you shall diligently guard yourselves to love Yahweh your Elohim, just like what he said to the Reubenites and Gad as they went back to their land. Same kind of wording. But if you do turn back at all and cling to the remnant of these nations, these that remain among you, and intermarry with them, and go into them, and they into you, know for certain that Yahweh your Elohim shall no longer drive these nations out before you, and they shall be snares and traps to you, and a whip on your side and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land which Yahweh your Elohim has given you. And see, this day I am going the way of all the earth. Remember, it is allotted for man to die once, so. And you know in all your hearts that in all your being that not one word has failed from all good which Yahweh your Elohim spoke concerning you. All of it has come to you, and not one word of them has failed. And it shall be that as every good word has come upon which Yahweh your Elohim promised you, so Yahweh does bring upon you every evil word, the blessings and the cursings, until he has destroyed you from this good land which Yahweh your Elohim has given you. When you transgress the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, which he commanded you, and shall go and serve other mighty ones, or other deities, other gods, and bow down to them, and the displeasure of Yahweh shall burn against you, and you shall perish quickly from the good land which he has given you. So nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. It's the same, how would I say it? It's the same judgments either way, And the Father's put before them, because he said these good things will happen if you do these things. And it's like a witness to them right now. They're in the land. These good things have come to pass, just like the Father said. So you got to think to yourself, well, if he did that, then he will do what he said if we don't obey him as well. So he's very complete in what he did as far as good, and he will be very complete of evil things against us as well if we do not obey. So Joshua leads the people in a covenant renewal gathering here, as we can see. This is the covenant that Yahweh had established with Israel that began with Abram, way before it was the people called Israel. So you see this pattern of this covenant that was handed down. And even the promises that were given to Abraham are coming to pass as well. The Father is true to his word. We have to see that. Yahweh renewed this covenant with Moshe, and now again here with Joshua in the land. That was the promise. So Joshua 24, and Joshua has gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and for their judges and for their officers, and they presented themselves before Elohim. So we have this renewal, I would say, of this coming together. A renewal is like, okay, Joshua wants to make sure that you guys have heard this. Yeah, I know you've heard it for 40 years, but it's a continual thing, and that's why we should study the Torah. We should study his word continually and go through that. And we can see where the feasts now play a huge part in motivating us and getting us on that pattern of a continuation to remember these things. So Joshua gathers all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. This is very close to the wording that's in 23, where Joshua summoned these same people saying, I am old and well advanced, because that verbiage had come up before already. What follows is the farewell speech in which he is preparing the people for his death. In the same way, like I mentioned before, like how Moshe earlier prepared the people in his death in Deuteronomy. So the last national assembly took place in Shiloh. Shechem is quite near Mount Ebal that we've heard in Gerizim. Remember the Mount of Cursing and Blessing. So this is a very special place, and I've learned this so much over the years, especially when visiting Israel and standing in this very place. It very well could be in the general area. And it's like, wow, it really, if you go back and look where things happen in Scripture, you know, the blessing and the cursing and the things that happen within that general area, that's always it should be in the forefront of the story. But remember, it's right there, you know. So when you hear about these places, think about other things that happen in these places. And prophetically, you can see the Father speaking to you in that manner as well. And so this is the place where Abraham also built an altar and was given that very promise. So they're at this place where the very promise began, that they came and they read the commandments, the blessings of cursing. Now Joshua is bringing them right back there again, all the heads of state, all the heads of the tribes, and they're going through it again. Remember what happened here, guys. Remember the promises. They have come true all the way back to our father Abraham. So there's so much that's packed in there. And at the same time, the same place where Jacob had purchased a plot of land in Shechem is around the same area where this is going on. And Joshua, and after the death of Joshua, the people buried Joseph's bones in a plot of ground in this same area as well. So, and Yahshua said unto all the people, thus says Yahweh Elohim of Israel, long ago your fathers dwelt beyond the river, Terah, the father of Abram, and the father of Nahor, and they served other mighty ones. This begins a recount of the history of Yahweh in Israel, and will continue through verse 13. So he goes in and talks about, okay, remember your forefathers, where they had come from, the change of life that they had done. So he's bringing back their whole history. And in some ways, it's an identity of who you are. Don't forget who you are. So I'm getting low on time here. But I want to close with this, because this is that point where Joshua says, as for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord, like we know that. And it's interesting. So if we view Joshua, what he's doing, he's setting a precedent before the people, you know. And I was talking with Mark, and it's so much that, you know, if we can't depend here in America, we can't depend on our president or any of our government or our elected officials to do it. It's our job to take up this and stand and make a precedent that we're going to serve Yahweh and what he has set down for us, just like Joshua is reminding them. And we do see, as history goes on, it quickly gets forgotten. So we have to be it. You and I, we have to set the precedent of not changing and taking what Joshua was setting before, because it did mention that they still have issues. Joshua was telling them, get rid of some of your idols and stuff like that. But you know what? If you're not going to, I'm paraphrasing, if you're not going to, I am going to stand. So we have to, even in this nation, regardless if anyone else going to, we have to do it. We have to stand on these principles of our Father. Then it goes, and this pretty much brings us to the end. End of Joshua dies, they bury him, and Eleazar, the son of Aaron, dies. And this all happens in the mountains of Ephraim, where they are buried. So, like I said before, there's so much more packed in there, and I encourage you to go back and maybe read the last couple verses and look at Joshua maybe a little bit different, because he's standing up, and it's just not a fun song that we sing. you know, and that one song that we do sing, the other part, we're not going to bow down to the gods of men. That's what's the core of what Joshua was saying, because he knows it's active out within his people, but he's going to stand, and we have to stand as well. Next time, I encourage all of you, we're going to start the book of Matthew. All right, so next Shabbat, bring your Bibles, maybe read ahead, and I'd like to get your input, and we're going to start the Gospel of Matthew for our in-depth study. Let me close in prayer. Father Yahuwah, we give you great thanks for all that you have done, you gathering all of us here. We thank you that you revealed to us yourself and your words in a way to walk about. And we thank you for the spirit that you give us of encouragement and empowerment to walk them out before you. We thank you. We thank you that your words have become flesh and he has dwelt among us. Your only brought forth Son, Yahushua, who we see as our Messiah, our high priest, and our King. We thank you for that redemption. Amen. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and thank you for coming.
When are we coming back?